So are you still doing 2026
Yes,
changes?
I am.
All right.
Won't be long before we get past all of this, and we'll be moving on to something else. Uh, I'm because I mean I'm finishing up chapter 5 into chapter 6, and usually chapter 7 and 8 doesn't have a ton in it, so we're probably a
Okay.
few weeks away from having this knocked out, and then
Nice.
we need to get in touch um, with Mark Candles. We told him we'd have him on, let him come on and
Oh
do
yeah.
uh,
It, it
some
looks like
estimating
he's
and stuff.
fired up. It looks like he's got his like laptop set up. I don't know. I don't know if he got his cowboy hat fired up yet, but
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to get me something decent to just compete with you guys, you know. But I like how you moved the text down so we could see it.
yeah. Y'all were complaining and giving me hell, so I thought I better fix that. But once again, one of the things that you're starting to see a lot that has happened in the code is they're coming in talking about having documentation, and this is dealing where you have a peer distribution system, and they're telling you here they want to have documentation provided here of the engineered electrical design of the peer distribution system, and this is required to be provided at the request of the authority having jurisdiction. And this is to help the jurisdiction understand what's taking place to help minimize potential hazards.
Right.
Okay, so this is just another example, and if you really look, where did we really start getting in and start requiring a lot of documentation? Do you know what standard it was?
OSHA.
OSHA's always required it, but NFPA, it really started happening in 70E.
Okay.
We started requiring a lot of documentation in there. And if you sort of look, and I can prove this fact, if when we would get in and we started looking at documentation and everything, we always got to where we wanted to document a meeting between the facility and the contractor. So you had the
Right.
host employer and the contractor. That was always documented. And if there were any other potential hazards that you would be working on that and the facility was aware of it, they had to make the contractor aware of it. And what they would do is they would have an energized electrical work permit. And from there, you would have both parties sign off on it. Well, then we went there, and what did we start requiring? We started requiring labeling at the service and everything for your labels that were there. And if you
Sure.
remember when they started it off, we had 110.16, and you had to identify the hazard that was there. Okay. Well, if you
Yeah.
look at what's happened consecutive years after every 3 years, now you're starting to see they're requiring a lot of documentation. Well, the second thing that we went for that documentation that had to be documented there was we wanted you to have the available fault current. Well,
So just to correct me if I'm wrong, isn't 11016 isn't that just for justified energized work?
yeah, that's it. It's just label identification when it first started. That's where it started. And
Gotcha.
then after that, what did we jump into? We jumped into 110.24 A and B, and that's where we got in saying you need to have the available fault current there. Well, all
Sure.
of that was dictated based on what? 70E document. And if you looked at the 70E document, we come in and we had the tables that were set back there. Tables now they're 130.7C 15 A, B, and C. A is for AC, and B is for DC, and then C is for selecting your PPE. But when it first started, we had categories 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we don't have a 0, but we got 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, those categories are based on some certain parameters. Well, what were those parameters? One is we need to know what the available fault current was and what the clearing time was. And then we did it based on an 18-inch typical working distance from the part. So
Right.
we needed that in there. So then we got that. Then what do they come in and do? Which we've seen through the 2026, and the 2023 that they're referring you back also to where 110.21 that deals with what? The color
Labeling.
of it. So if you had a warning,
Isn't 11021 where the one where it can't be handwritten?
oh yeah, it's all in there. 110.21B gets into the color. But
Right.
you get over and you pick that up. If it's danger, it's red. If it's a caution, a warning, we put it in orange. And if it's just a signal, we put it in yellow. And that's what based off they got an informational up there off what? NTC 535. Okay.
So all they're doing is just bringing this over to boatyards and marinas.
Yeah, well, that's not really what this is. But what I'm trying to say is everything is getting documented more. Okay.
Gotcha.
And that's what the most important part is you're starting to see a lot of direct relation to the engineering that's done and also the other standards. That there's a
Gotcha.
lot of referral back there. Okay.
Okay.
Now this gets into the equipotential planes and the bonding of the equipotential planes. And you'll remember we've done a lot of this already. They've moved some stuff around, but they've come in and fixed a few things here. And this is, if I went over and looked at 680.26, where I'm dealing with swimming pools and stuff, and we talk about the copper grid. Well, when we were doing the copper grid and everything, we'd bond all that in with a number 8 bare solid copper conductor, right? Okay.
Yes,
and then they tell you when you're doing this grid, they want it set up in a network of 12 by 12. Okay, so they're uniformly spaced perpendicular grid patterns, basically what they're telling you here. Okay.
Okay.
And they tell you if you're going to do exothermic welding here, they say that's permitted to be used, or you can use listed splicing devices. Okay. So sort of the same things we're already doing in all the others. So all they did is incorporate these. Oh, look there. They even tell you here. I hadn't looked at this because this is we were supposed to do this in 2 weeks ago, but looky there. They're telling you to look where 680.26 for consistency.
True.
So they're just telling you the bonding's done the same.
I have seen actual listed splices for concrete encasement and direct burial that were mechanical.
Sure.
For those.
And looky there, they even the last sentence they got 2 other sections, but just as an example, if you look at 547.44B, what does that deal with? Agriculture.
Yep.
So everything's being consistent. And then they came in here, and I think this is pretty good because what they're trying to do is reduce the likelihood where you have other parts of an existing installation that could actually contribute to the electrical hazard that you might have exposure to. So when you look here, this is where, and you'll see they moved a couple of things down, but the main one you're going to deal with here is where they talk about replacing. And they say when you have replacement of equipment is necessary, they're telling you here, now look at this one more time because this is what I've been saying. A qualified person shall document. So you got to have documentation here and replace the equipment in accordance with the requirements of this code. The installation shall require an inspection of the circuit. Any servicing necessary to address issues discovered during the inspection shall be done in accordance with 555.15A. So anytime you have equipment that's been damaged here, they're telling you it's got to be documented and serviced by a qualified person. Okay. So I think, and another thing that's interesting, if you look in A there, it also says equipment that has been damaged shall be recognized, documented, and serviced by a qualified person to the addition of this code to which it was originally installed. So they're telling you here to do what? Bring it up to code.
Yeah.
You see that? Now, this is a total different thing than what the myth was. That's funny how this just happened to roll in with that. But this one here, they're telling you to do it. But when we were looking at residential, that's not there. Here, they're telling you to do this.
Yes,
So
sir.
there's you a good one right there, brother.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just show, it's funny how sometimes some of that stuff rolls in, with
It
it.
does.
And
Honestly.
this and I, this is where you get in branch circuits. But what I want to point out is showing what 1 and 2 say here. They did some clarity here, where they removed the word required here. Okay, and when they remove that from the heading, they're basically just saying these are branch circuits, and then they've got 2 types here. They got a sign outlet and a branch circuit rating. Okay, now look what
Okay.
it says. Each commercial building and each commercial occupancy accessible to pedestrians shall be provided with at least 1 outlet in an accessible location at each entrance to each tenant space for sign and outline lighting system use. Now,
Okay.
let me explain this. If they're telling you you have to take and you have to provide here at least 1 outlet in an accessible location, if you've got a totally enclosed sign that is mounted to the wall and you've got to assemble that and you've got to get up on a lift and everything, is that considered to be accessible?
No.
No. And it is accessible, but the thing is the outlet there. Well, first of all, there's no outlet in the sign.
If
Okay.
you have to remove pieces of a building, then it's not accessible.
That's the way I look at it. But some will argue that's what I'll say, because it doesn't say readily accessible. But let's look at this. Now, if I'm going to make something accessible that somebody can get to, how would you make that accessible?
Yeah, I mean,
I'd put a box there. You got a
to
box.
to me, you're damaging the finish of the building if you happen to open that sign up.
Well, sure. Now look at this. How would I make it accessible? Well, it's sort of like, let's say just say a house, commercial building, I don't care what it is, and I come up in the ceiling, I put an outlet there, and then, or say I put a box there. I put a box there, and then I feed a fixture from there. Where's the outlet? Is it at the fixture or is it at the box?
It's at the box.
It's at the box. And all you got to do is go look at 314.27 and it tells you that. Okay?
Right.
Now, let's look at the branch circuit rating. It says outlets shall be supplied by a branch circuit rated at least 20 amps that supplies no other loads. Okay? Now, I'm going to supply an outlet, okay, at least 20 amps. How am I going to take and supply that outlet? And that is my point here. Where is that outlet located here for this branch circuit? Well, if I go out on a pole and I've got a pole out there, do they take and put a handhold there that you have access to?
Yeah.
That's your outlet right there.
Yeah.
That's the access to it. Okay? And then when you look at exception 1, what does it say? A sign or outlet, lighting outlet shall not be required at entrances for delivery, service corridors, and that. So the same things are setting up here that they've had before, and they're telling you where the outlet's not required. Okay?
Sure.
So they fix this and they broke it down into 2 parts here to tell you what is a sign outlet, and then they tell you what a branch circuit rating is. Okay?
Sure.
So that they're taking care of both instances here in my estimation. All right? Now, this one here is another one, and this is a short circuit current rating, and look what they've done here. This is where you're dealing with elevators in this point here. And they're saying the elevator control panel shall be legibly marked in the field with the available fault current at its line terminals. Okay? And it says the field marking shall include the date, the available fault current calculation was performed and shall meet the requirements. Look there again in 110.21b. And of course, that calculation has to be what? Documented.
Yep.
Look there. And then they tell you.
And not handwritten.
Mm-hmm. Now watch this. When modification to the electrical system occur that affect the available fault current at the elevator control panel, the available fault current shall be verified or recalculated as necessary to ensure the elevator controls panel short current rating is sufficient for the available fault current at the line terminals of equipment. Now this is great, because if you go look at 110.24a and b, they got the available fault current, and they also talk about what? Modifications.
Yep.
Okay, so they're tying it in right back there. And then when you get into the labeling portion of it, where does it tie you back into? 110.21b.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm trying to tell everybody, if you look at what we're showing you here and what we're going over, everything is matching up, and they're taking all these things into consideration in order to provide what? Protection. So anybody that works on this, if they have to work on it energized, they know what they have to do at this point. And you've got to have the available fault current, you've got to have the clearing time, and then you do the estimation. If you're using one of the tables, 18 inches. If you want to calculate it individually, then you go to Annex D of 70E, and that's where the calculation is performed from.
Yeah, and so what they have is they have correlation with 70E, 70B, OSHA, UL. Like, I mean, it goes all the way across the board. Like, they're not missing anything.
Sure. You know, like somebody said, and they were arguing when you're going, OSHA doesn't apply to residential. Oh yeah, it does. Let me, and I can explain how I know this to be a fact. If somebody goes out there and works on something, and do they have to follow the rules of 70E as a journeyman, master, whoever goes out there, and they're working on that? If they work on it energized, do they have to follow the rules of 70E?
Oh, yeah.
Sure. Now, if something happened and OSHA decided to go out there and they cited you because you didn't wear the proper PPE, they would use the 70E document as a remedial standard to enforce that, and they could fine you for that.
True.
That's just a fact.
Yeah.
It just isn't limited, they only cover commercial industrial. No, they can go out and get you any place. That's a fallacious argument just because you don't think it applies. You show me anywhere in the OSHA document it says it doesn't cover residential.
True.
Let me ask this. If I look at 1910.7 and you take all these appliances, you could have a mixer, you could have a microwave, you can have a blender, a toaster, coffee machine, all of that. All those products that you're purchasing from the store, and you look on the box, it's got a UL label on it. When they put that UL label on it, did OSHA have rules that were in place that were to be followed by the manufacturer in order to get that UL listing?
Yeah, I mean, some of that stuff's so stupid though. They're saying it's got to have like a grounded cord, it's got to have like a molded plastic so water can't get, I mean, they're just like, okay, duh, like, yeah, we're not gonna just like leave it open,
Well, the main thing is they're providing means and requiring the listing and labeling, because that protects who? The homeowner.
True.
That's just a fact. And it's no different. If I go out and I change 2-prong receptacle out to 3-prong, is there rules in the code that I have to follow to do that? Sure. Yeah. You got to look over at 406.4D to do that. And there's different ways to do it. The easiest way is just find the receptacle that's upstream from it and put what on it? A GFCI. See what I'm saying? Okay, let me get through this because I know they're getting ready.
All right.
All right. They added a new exception 3 here. And this is getting into the disconnecting means portion. And they tell you here, when individual branch circuit supplies an elevator control system with an adjustable speed drive, the disconnecting means that's required by 620.51C1 shall be permitted to comply with 431.28. And it says the disconnecting means shall be listed and shall be lockable open in accordance with 110.25. Now, that's something, because they're talking about those type of motors that are listed in 430.128 that deal with adjustable speed drive systems. And they're telling you here that the disconnecting means can comply with that in 620.51C1, but the disconnecting has to be listed and it has to be lockable in the open position.
True.
Okay? So I think that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Now they did the same thing. This is dropping you into 620.51E, and this is where you get into surge protection. And they're telling you a surge protection device shall be provided as an integral part or installed immediately adjacent to the disconnecting means. So let me explain this. You can have one that's installed immediately adjacent to the disconnecting means, and that's a separate setup. But if it's integral to it, that's part of a listed UL assembly. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So that, and if you look, what are they tying this in with? They're basically tying this into some revisions that took place in Article 242.1, and this is getting into this. And they're basically telling you that if you look, it says the listing requirement is removed because it is redundant to what? 242.6, which already requires a surge protection device to be what? Listed.
There you go.
Okay.
Hey, what's up, Cameron? Just hang tight, brother. We're almost done.
All right. And then looky here. Now you're getting into selective coordination here. And if you look at the selective coordination, look, the same stuff is happening here. They talk about when you're doing replacements and you're dealing with what? Modifications.
Right.
Okay. And they're just telling you here that if you're going to come in and do a replacement here at the elevator system overcurrent protection devices, it tells you they have to be reevaluated to ensure what? You have selective coordination, and it's maintained with all supply side and load side OCPDs or overcurrent protection devices. And then if you have any modifications, additions, or deletions to the elevator system, then selective coordination to the elevator system overcurrent protection devices with all supply side and load side overcurrent protection devices, once again, have to be what? Reevaluated. Okay?
Yep.
So they're doing a lot of clarification here. All right. And that did get me finished up tonight. How about that? So